chosen a Climate of Change by George the Poet, and I'm gonna start by summarizing, and then I'm gonna switch up the order of my analysis and talk about message first, and then I'm gonna talk about mood and composition and how through these mediums he can convey his message, and then at last I'm gonna talk about how other poets have conveyed the same message through poems. And to summarize, it's also a bit of the message, but the way I would summarize it's how the lack of talk about global warming is an issue, and how politicians, journalists, and media outlets have slowed down the conversation by choosing not to convey as fake news, but not taking it seriously, and how we as the people have to come together and listen to scientists and work together to see the facts and realize they're a big problem, and then have this idea of an organism coming together as one so we can change the climate and restore global warming in nature. Um, and that's also the message. And he even states it in the poem in the last stanza, where he writes, "This is the solution government can't offer: ground level cooperation. Doesn't it sound better than having patience?" And that's where he talks about the government is too slow, and how we as a people have, from the ground level, need to change, not society, but change global warming. And so how does he convey these messages? And we could start to talk about composition, where the poem has a AABB rhyme scheme, and it's very joyful. It's kind of like Dr. Seuss, the not a poet, but the kid's author, and it has the same feel to it. It's very up in voice and then down in voice. If you could take something like the second stanza, third stanza, "You remember science from school, an essential subject. Let's consider it standing with the general public. Our scientists are in a position to advise us on some of our biggest decisions, and it's probably in our interest to listen." It has this very joyful rhyme scheme, but then you could ask yourself, maybe it rhymed, but it didn't sound very joyful, and that's because he, as the author, has chosen to use very serious words, and by serious words I mean a lot of these words have the synonyms that are a lot more joyful and relaxing, but he chooses to use these for a good reason, intentionally, because it has a serious meaning to the poem, and he wants his message to be seen as serious and not just another poem. But then why make it rhyme? And the only thing I can come up with is, actually, it was a comedian that said, he's called Bo Burnham. He said, if you want someone to remember something, make it rhyme, because just like a song that gets trapped in your head, you really remember the lyrics and the words if it rhymes, because it creates this melody. That's why some people remember better by rhyming, having a song in their head to remember certain things. And that's why I think he made it rhyme, because really he has a very serious tone with the lack of adjectives, and, as I said, the serious choice of words he uses. And that also creates a mood and atmosphere that is very serious, and I think that is a very, very important part of this poem, because without that it just sounds like something that's a bit goofy and doesn't really have any heart and soul written into it, which this has. And also you could look at things as the title, A Climate of Change. Of course it's a reference to the climate is changing, but also how we have to change the climate and change our way of thinking. So he's even conveyed his message in the title, and I think that makes it very full of heart and soul again, because he hasn't chosen this goofy, he could call it home or climate change is a problem, and then it would be non-memorable and it wouldn't be that serious. And the themes we're working with in this poem is stuff like restore and maintain, of course, the climate, and then coming together. Again, this idea I've talked about, this organism thought, that you are stronger as a group than one, and is no I in team kind of thing, and then of course climate change. But then we can talk about, does spreading awareness like this actually work? And I always think back to always, we've had this once. I think back to the 2016. There was a video on YouTube that was put up called "Dear Future Generations, Sorry," and it went viral. It got over 20 million views, and it's the same. It rhymes. It's in a very serious tone. It's how we're sorry to the future generation for fucking Earth up so bad, and what's it called, wildfires and tsunamis, and how man-made global warming is a real thing, and how we owe our future generation a real sorry because we've created these problems for them that probably are going to be irreversible. And so I think it could work because his video, it went viral, of course, and he continued making them, and they continued getting more and more views, and I think people really took inspiration from that. And even though he's just a poet, as he in this A Climate of Change, I think he's really making an impact. But he also comments on this problem. I wouldn't call it a problem, but this issue that he isn't really doing anything himself other than spreading awareness. In the second to last stanza, I'm trying to play my part as an artist, but all I do is write verses and harmonize melodies. Now, the point of us working together on this is that one of you knows how to decarbonize energy, so if you could consider that when making your plans, I'm happy to leave it in your capable hands. So he comments on, he is just a poet, but he's trying his best. He doesn't know how to decarbonize energy, but the scientists that do have to work as a team and a force in society to make these changes to the climate. And that's my analysis on A Climate of Change, George the Poet.